Hello again, and welcome to Series 7 of the International Soccer Podcast. I'm Kevin.
And I'm Connor. In this six-part series, we're doing a group-by-group preview of African Cup 2021. And today we're taking a look at Group F, which is Tunisia, Mali, Mauritania, and Gambia.
That's right, and we're dividing this podcast into three sections. So part one begins with an overview of the group and a look at the comparison of the size and each country, where they are in Africa and the population. And then by far the longest part is a team-by-team overview where we look at their long history in the World Cup and African Cup with a special focus on African Cup finals history. We're going to take a look at their recent history and their qualifying record for this tournament and a brief overview of their players. And finally, in part three, a discussion of the prospects of each team and our predictions. So we'll look at the rankings, the odds, the head-to-head records, and then a discussion of their prospects.
That's right. And just some notes on this tournament. It is called the 2021 African Cup, even though it's being played in 2022 in host country Cameroon. There are 24 teams participating. The top two in each group advance, along with the four top third-place finishers. And the qualifying structure was a preliminary round to reduce the 52 participants to 48. And then those 48 teams were divided into 12 groups of four, with the top two from each group qualifying for this tournament.
All right, great. Let's move on to part one then, which is an overview of the countries, beginning with Tunisia.
All right, so Tunisia is a small country on Africa's northern coast. Its area is about 163,000 kilometers. So it's about half the size of Italy, which is its nearest European neighbor. And its population is 11.8 million people, which is ranks 31st out of 54 African countries.
All right, a bit smaller than I thought there. Moving on to Mali.
Mali is a large Saharan country. It's at over 1.2 million square kilometers. It's larger than France, Spain, and Portugal all put together.
Wow.
And its population is 20.8 million. So that ranks 20th in Africa. So a decent sized country there.
Right. Okay, moving on to Mauritania, I have next.
So Mauritania, at over 1 million square kilometers, is just a bit smaller than Mali. It ranks 11th and 28th largest in the world. It's a large country in the Sahara Desert that does have a border on the Atlantic Ocean. And there are 4.2 million people in Mauritania. That's 39th out of 54 countries in Africa. And it actually has among the lowest population densities, not just in Africa, but the world, being a small population in a very large desert country.
Right. Okay. And finally, Gambia, speaking of small.
Yeah, Gambia is just 10,000 square kilometers. It's 49th largest out of 54 countries, or sixth smallest, said another way. And it's also the smallest country in the African mainland. All the other African countries smaller are islands. And it's roughly the same size as Qatar, the hosts of the 2022 World Cup. And its population is 2.5 million people, which is the 13th smallest in the continent.
Right. Okay. Well, let's look at those in comparison with each other. I'm just going to switch Gambia and Mauritania here.
Right. So there's two really large countries in terms of area, Mali and Mauritania, and then Tunisia and Gambia being much smaller. In terms of population, though, Mali is the largest at 20.8 million. Tunisia is next at 11.8 million. And then Mauritania is just 4.2 and Gambia 2.5 million. So relatively speaking, they're all smaller countries in terms of population, with Mauritania and Gambia being quite small compared to some of the other countries here.
Right. Okay, well, let's move on to talk about their soccer teams. And we will begin with Tunisia. Do they have a nickname?
They are, or they do. It's the Carthaginian Eagles, a reference to Carthage, kind of a prosperous Roman era city.
Right. Okay, well, we'll start with a look at their participation and achievements in tournaments. Their first international game was in 1957, and they're a pretty senior team, joining the World Cup qualification in 1962. They withdrew in 1966 as part of that Asian African boycott that many nations took part in, but otherwise they participated consistently. They joined the African Cup in the same year in 1962, and but withdrew actually from 4 cups between 1968 and 1974, as well as withdrawing in 1980. But they participated consistently since then. They were also African representatives for the 2005 Confederations Cup, which we'll touch on briefly. And their local group is UNAF, the Union of North African Football, although this group, unlike many other in Africa, doesn't have a competition. But Tunisia does sometimes take part in the Arab Cup, although they've entered only 2 of the 9 editions of that since 1963. In terms of achievement, they've reached the World Cup 5 times, although they've never made it past the group stage. They won 1 African Cup title in 2004 when they hosted, and have otherwise finished second twice. And they recently also finished second in the 2021 Arab Cup. Connor, I didn't realize they were so small compared to Morocco, so that's not a bad record for a country their size.
No, they punch above their weight. When you compare some of the other North African countries, Egypt having over 100 million people and Morocco about 37, they're pretty small, just 11 million people. So, yeah, they do quite well, even compared to some of their near neighbors.
Yeah. Well, let's take a look at their World Cup history. We're just going to do an overview of this one. So, as we said, they reached the World Cup 5 times. The first was in 1978, then 3 in a row from 1998 to 2006, and finally again in 2018. They fell at the group stage in every case. 1978, the first one, was the best performance, going 1 win, 1 draw, and 1 loss. But they managed only a draw in each of the 3 more recent appearances, until finally winning their second game in 2018 against Panama. In qualifying, they didn't come close in the early years, and they didn't actually reach the final round until 1986, apart, of course, from their 1978 qualification. They were a consistent contender after that, though, coming close in the following 3 cups, falling at the last stage to Algeria in 1990, to Cameroon in 1994, and then finishing a group stage just 1 point behind rivals Morocco in 1998. So they were well deserving of reaching the cup 3 times in a row after that. And they were also close in 2010 and 2014, finishing a point behind Nigeria in a group stage in 2010, and then losing to Cameroon in a final round knockout in 2014. So always close there, Connor. Let's take a closer look at their 2 most recent campaigns.
Well, 2018 was a successful campaign, as you mentioned. As one of the top 27 ranked teams in Africa, they received a bye in the preliminary round of qualifying. And their round 2 pairing, they beat Mauritania in both legs. That's the team they meet here. They went undefeated through the round 3 group stage, tying only Congo DR away and Libya at home, but beating last place Guinea twice. Congo DR kept pace with a consistent campaign, but Tunisia bested them to advance. At the finals, they lost to England on an injury time penalty, really heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
Then to Belgium to go out after 2 games, but they earned 3rd place in the group stage with a last game win over Panama.
Right. Okay. And that was a good campaign. How have they done so far in 2022 qualifying?
They received a bye in the preliminary round, and then won all their home games, as well as a game on the road to Zambia. They tied in Mauritania. Again, they met them again recently, and lost in Equatorial Guinea, though. But they were never really in danger, and they finished first in round 2 of 3. That means they'll have a home and away playoff to decide who goes to the World Cup, though their opponent has yet to be determined.
Right, but either way, they're once again close or even there in the World Cup. Let's take a look at their African Cup history. And their best period in World Cup play also marks their only African Cup title when they hosted in 2004. Otherwise, they finished second twice in 1965 when they also hosted, and in 1996. They reached the semifinals 4 times besides, though after 2004, it took until 2019 to next have a top 4 finish. They've also reached the cup every time from 1994, and generally they pass the group stage, failing to do so only 4 times. That's over 13 tournaments between 1994 and 2019. 2006 to 2017 saw them reach the quarterfinals 5 out of 7 times, but it seemed an impenetrable ceiling until 2019, which Connor will talk about shortly. Their worst period was 10 years, the 10 years before 1994, when they failed to reach 5 cups in a row, despite the tournament expanding to 12 teams in the last of these. So Connor will take us through their recent history, but first we're going to take a deep dive into their World Cup finals history. So in their first African Cup in 1962, they finished 3rd. That's much better than it sounds, though. Firstly, only 8 teams entered, and secondly, they did receive a bye in the first round of qualifying when Morocco withdrew. And thirdly, they also lost to Nigeria in the first leg of the second round, and they were awarded the second leg. This happened because Nigeria, who had gone up a goal, walked off the field when Tunisia equalized at 65. They felt the goal was unfair, and they thought the referee was helping the home team, Tunisia, to a win. In the cup, they lost to host Ethiopia, and in the lost to host Ethiopia in the semifinals, but they beat Uganda in the 3rd place match to take 3rd place. They were knocked out at the group stage in the next cup in 1963 and took 2nd when they hosted in 1965. There was no qualifying there, and in the group stage they finished tied on points with Senegal. A coin toss saw them through to the final and condemned Senegal to the 3rd place match. The final there ended with Ghana, tied with Ghana actually, but then they lost in extra time. They withdrew from the 1968 competition after playing 3 of the 4 qualifying games, and they didn't enter the next 3 cups. They failed to qualify in 1976, beaten out by Sudan, but finished 4th in the next cup in 1978. There they went undefeated in the group stage, but lost to host Ghana in the semi-final. In an uncanny reversal of 1962, Tunisia walked off the field against Nigeria for the exact same reason that Nigeria had in 1962. They were walking off in protest of Nigeria's equalizing goal at 42, and 42nd minute, that is, which they considered an unfair goal. So a weird bit of history there, Connor.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that. That's quite the story.
Yeah. Anyway, Tunisia withdrew in 1980 and fell at the group stage in 1982, and then failed to qualify for the next 5 cups in a row. They returned as host in 1994, and as we mentioned, they've qualified every time since. But despite hosting in 1994, they were embarrassingly knocked out at the group stage with a loss to Mali, who they meet here, and a draw with Zaire. But they made up for it by finishing second in the next cup in 1996, losing to host South Africa. That was shortly after South Africa had returned to African football. It started a good period for Tunisia when they passed the group stage in 6 of 7 cups, finishing fourth in 2000 and winning as host in 2004. Fourth place in 2000 also saw them beaten by South Africa on penalties this time. But in 2004, they suffered only a draw with Guinea in the group stage, but otherwise beat Senegal, Nigeria on penalties, neither team walking off the field this time, and local rivals Morocco in the final. After 2004, they generally passed the group stage, but could not make it past the quarterfinals. It was Nigeria on penalties in 2006, Cameroon in extra time in 2008, Ghana in extra time in 2012, and Equatorial Guinea in extra time in 2015. And we talked about that game in 2015 when we talked about Equatorial Guinea, but I got to repeat it here. It was such a dramatic affair. The game, I'll say Tunisia went up on a goal at 70 and then resorted to time-wasting tactics. And although the game was refereed terribly and spiraled out of control, a penalty in injury time to Equatorial Guinea was a fair enough call, even if it infuriated the Tunisians. So Equatorial Guinea went on to score on a beautiful free kick in extra time, which left Tunisia in fits of anger, especially when Equatorial Guinea was then the one employing time-wasting tactics. Tunisia actually trashed the dressing room. I didn't include that detail last time. And they were fined, and Equatorial Guinea was also fined for their part. Are you happy to hear that story again, Connor?
That is, remarkable, and would be interesting should the two teams meet again in this tournament.
I think they did meet again after that in qualifying, but certainly not as fiery as that meeting.
Oh, that's good.
Anyway, Connor's going to tell us if Tunisia was able to break that quarterfinal ceiling since then.
Well, 2017 saw a consistent performance in qualifying, especially compared to some recent campaigns. They won all home games to finish ahead of Togo, who they tied away, and Liberia, who they lost to on the road. At the tournament, they lost to Senegal in their opener, but beat Algeria and Zimbabwe to finish second in the group stage. However, they seemed a bit anonymous and were beaten by the more vibrant Burkina Faso in the quarterfinal. So again, a quarterfinal exit for Tunisia.
One more try. Let's try 2019.
Here they had a very solid qualifying campaign, dropping points only in Egypt on an injury time goal, but ultimately proving the more consistent team. And they finished first in the qualifying group ahead of Egypt, Niger, and Eswatini, whose name changed from Swaziland during the campaign. At the tournament, they were unimpressive in the group stage, managing only draws with Angola, Mauritania, of course, who are in this group, and Mali. They finished second in the group stage behind Mali, though. After that, they tied Ghana in regulation in the round of 16, giving up an own goal in injury time, but they salvaged the situation by winning on penalties. They then easily beat upstarts Madagascar in the quarterfinals, so advanced, but they lost in extra time to Senegal in the semifinals, and then to Nigeria to finish in fourth place.
Oh, well, that's a little bit better than the semi-final.
Yeah, top four, not bad at all last time out for Tunisia.
Yeah, and it's interesting actually that that group stage, which featured which ended Mali, Tunisia, Angola, and Mauritania, has three of the same teams as the group this time.
Yeah, some familiar opponents. That's very interesting. Angola just being replaced by Gambia this time.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, let's take a quick look at the local cup and other involvements. Here, the local cup, as we mentioned, is UNAF. I shouldn't say cup. The grouping is UNAF, Union of North American Football. We said above that they don't actually have a cup for senior men. The group seems to focus their attention more on youth and women's soccer, and they also run some club competitions. So we'll move on to talk about their Confederations Cup in 2005, and they qualified for that by winning the 2004 African Cup, but they had a tough run of it, facing Argentina and Germany in the first two games, but they did manage to beat Australia in the third game to finish third in the group stage. And the Arab Cup, although there were 9 Arab Cups between 1963 and 2012, Tunisia only took part in one of them in 1998, and there they were knocked out at the group stage. In 2021, though, the Arab Cup was revived after a 9-year hiatus, and actually it was taken over by FIFA, which made it a bit of a higher status competition. A much larger number of Arab countries joined this edition. So in light of that, Tunisia did very well to finish second, losing in the final there to Algeria. Okay, so let's summarize. Tunisia.
So Tunisia have really had 3 peaks. One at the beginning, in the mid '60s, where they finished in the top 3 in 2 of their 3 African Cups. The next began in the year 1978, where they both reached the World Cup and took 4th place in the African Cup. And then around the turn of the century, where they qualified for 3 World Cups in a row and won the African Cup as hosts in 2004. However, they had a long flat period from the mid '60s to the mid '90s, with 1978 being the only success. In recent times, they have continued to qualify for the African Cup and remain competitive in World Cup qualification, but had not gone beyond the quarterfinals in the African Cup since 2004. They finally did in 2019, which followed their World Cup qualification in 2018, which was their first since 2006.
Right. So after that long flat period, though they weren't weak, their World Cup qualification in 2018 and 4th place finish in 2019 were an improvement. And their hopes are still alive for 2022 World Cup qualification. Add to that their 2nd place finish in what was a competitive Arab Cup in 2021. Most teams there, Connor, actually sent their best teams, or most of their best players. There's a bit of a suggestion of a strong era afoot for Tunisia.
Yeah, we'll see. And a strong performance at this tournament would perhaps solidify that.
Definitely. Well, that leads us nicely into taking a look at their qualification for this tournament.
Well, they'll come in confident after a commanding performance in qualifying, suffering only a draw in Tanzania, who finished 3rd, but winning all games against 2nd place Equatorial Guinea and surprise bottom finishers Libya, their neighbors who were the 2nd seed.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
They won those 2 games by 3-goal margins, even away.
Wow. Yeah, they did finish 1st in their qualifying group and were 7 points ahead of 2nd place finish, so quite strong.
Yeah, definitely. And also, we're not looking at recent matches a lot of times because most teams haven't played beyond the World Cup qualifiers from September to November. But in Tunisia's case, they did take part in the Arab Cup and made it all the way to the final. Do you want to talk us through that?
Yeah, they beat Mauritania 5-1 in their opener, which is significant because they meet them here. They lost to Syria, but then beat the United Arab Emirates to get out of the group stage. And then they beat Oman and Egypt before losing 2-0 to Algeria in the final.
Yeah, Algeria's been quite imperious lately, so no shame there. A good run, all in all.
Absolutely.
Let's move on to talk a little bit about their players, and we're going to use the scorers in their 2 qualifying campaigns, 2021 African Cup and 2022 World Cup. And without going into too much detail, Connor, we have Wabi Khazri as the top scorer both times.
Yeah, he's an important player for them. I think we'll talk about him as our featured player. But yeah, I would say probably the star of this Tunisian team.
Definitely, but I'm not sure I'd have him taking penalties because he missed 1 in each case.
Yep.
Yusuf Nsakni is a veteran. He got a goal, and Anis Ben Slimani scored one goal in each of the campaigns. Any other players to point out there?
Yeah, those are the main ones. Naeem Sliti, he scored 12 goals. He plays for Al Ettifaq in Saudi Arabia. They do have players, playing in most of the major leagues in France, in England, and Germany. Not perhaps massive names, but enough players playing abroad. So yeah, perhaps the strength of Tunisia is more in the collective than in some individual players.
Yeah, that's right. I guess we should also point out Safadine Jaziri, because he got 3 goals in 2021 and 1 in 2022 qualifying. But let's take a look at our feature player, Wabi Khazri.
Yeah, he's a versatile midfield player who has 22 goals and 65 caps, so a really good return. He's been with the team since 2013 and is 30 years old. He currently plays with Saint Etienne in France, having moved there from Sunderland in England, having spent a couple seasons there, and played for some other clubs in France before that.
Yeah, his history with the team is long in terms of tournaments. In 2013, he was just a sub and just appeared in one game there, and also subbed in 2017. But that seems to have been due to an ankle injury, because he took a starting position after game 1. World Cup 2018, he was a starter, and also in 2019, he was a starter, so an important player for them.
For sure.
All right, let us move on to Mali. And do we have a nickname for them?
We do. Their nickname is the Eagles.
The Eagles, okay. Well, let's begin with an overview of their participation and achievements. Their first international game was in 1960, but honestly, they have a very short history in World Cup qualification. Their first entry was in 2002, having withdrawn in the general boycott of 1966, and in 1994 and 1998. They withdrew from those two and didn't enter any cups before the turn of the century otherwise. However, they've consistently participated from 2002 there. On the other hand, they have a much longer history in African Cup, participating from 1965 with only 3 absences. 1978 when they were disqualified, 1980 when they didn't enter, and 1998 when they withdrew. Their local group is the West African Football Union, which has organized tournaments starting in 2010 and then every second year from 2011 onwards. But Mali didn't participate beyond entering and withdrawing in 2011, and they've entered the last 2 tournaments, though, from 2017. So in terms of achievement, they haven't reached the World Cup in their short history of that tournament. Their best result is reaching the final round, but they've never finished in the top half of the table. That's really in contrast to their long African Cup history, where they finished in the top 4 5 times, their best result being a second place finish in 1972. And they've only recently begun qualifying in WAFU Cup competition there, and their best finish is the semi-finals in 2019. That's odd, isn't it, Connor? Such a long history in the African Cup and a short history in the World Cup.
Yeah, quite the contrast there. I'm not sure all the reasons for it, but
yeah, well, we're going to see it's a bit of a team of contrasts here. Our World Cup overview is actually pretty short because of that. Just let me get on track here. Mali has reached the final round of World Cup qualification in 4 of their 6 campaigns, but finished second last or last in the group every time until recently. Prior to that, 2010 had been their best performance. losing only at home to Ghana there. However, too many draws caused them to finish in third place behind Benin. Okay, let's see if they've done any better in the recent two campaigns.
So in 2018, they were one of the 27 top-ranked teams that received a bye in the first round. After that, in the round two pairing, they lost in the first leg, but won the second and narrowly advanced over Botswana on goal difference. They scored only one goal in the round three group stage, but tied 4 of their 6 games, including all home games. All of those were 0-0s. They were one of the draws spoiled the campaign of Ivory Coast, although they had also tied group winner Morocco in their previous game. They tied Gabon twice, but finished 4th in the group behind them. Their away game with Morocco saw them get 2 red cards and a 6-0 drubbing.
Ooh, wow, an unusual tournament that, or an unusual run.
Yeah, difficult group, it must be said. In 2022, they received a bye in the preliminary round, but then they showed excellent consistency in the main round of qualifying, suffering only a draw in Uganda, but beating Kenya and Rwanda twice to finish first in round 2 of 3. So that will see them as one of 10 teams competing in the final playoff round. And like Tunisia, their opponent is yet to be determined.
Right. Yeah, so by far their best World Cup campaign, kind of catching up with their African Cup record.
I'll note that just like the previous campaign, they didn't concede a goal at home, but whereas in 2018 they also didn't score. They scored 7 at home in 2022, so that turning those draws into wins made all the difference.
Right, a much better campaign, if only just for the scoring. All right, well, let's take a look at their African Cup first, an overview. While their World Cup record makes them seem actually quite feeble until 2022 at least, their African Cup history is far better, at least at points. In fact, though, they only reached the Cup twice in 15 tries between 1965 and 2000. But they made the very best of it, coming second in 1972 and fourth in 1994. Since 2002, though, they've only failed to reach the Cup once in 2006. So they maintained their record of reaching the semi-finals every time they competed in 2002 and 2004, a record which finally fell in 2008 when they were knocked out at the group stage. But another group stage finish in 2010. After that 2010 group stage finish, they finished third in both 2012 and 2013. So it looks like if they make it to the Cup, they're likely to make it to the top 4.
Yeah, incredible runs. Really kind of an odd bit of history there again.
Yeah. Following those 2 third-place finishes, they had 2 more group stage exits in a row, and soon we'll see how they've done in recent campaigns. But first, let's take a deeper dive into their African Cup finals history. So they first entered in 1965, but didn't qualify until 1972. In the group stage there, they tied Togo, Kenya, and then host Cameroon to finish second and advance. A 10th semi-final with Zaire ended 3-3, but then they won an extra time to reach the final. And they lost to Congo in the final. Sorry, I got a little messed up there. Okay, anyway, they left as abruptly as they came, not qualifying again for 22 years. In 1994, though, they popped into the Cup, took 4th place, and left again, not qualifying for the next 3 tournaments after that. That 4th place, though, sounds a bit better than it was. It was actually earned through only 2 wins over 5 games. True, they did well over Tunisia. They did well to win over Tunisia, who was the host in the group stage. And that single win was enough to see them through the 3-team group stage. Also, a good win over Egypt in the quarterfinals got them to the semifinals, but they lost the next two games in a row, which earned them fourth place. 2002 and 2004 were the next qualifications, and they once again got past the group stage to earn fourth place in both cases. In 2002, it was as tournament host. Ties with Libya and Nigeria, plus a win over Algeria, saw them through the group stage, and they beat South Africa in the quarterfinals. Again, it was all losses after that to end in fourth. 2002 also saw them undefeated in the group stage, and then with a quarterfinal win over Guinea, but they were no match for Morocco in the semi-final, and no match for Nigeria in the third place game either. Their fifth cup was in 2008, and it was the first time they failed to pass the group stage. Undefeated in qualification, they started well in the cup, tying Benin and then tying Nigeria, but a loss to Ivory Coast left them tied with Nigeria in the table, but below them on goal difference. 2010 started with, this is a great story, Connor, one of the most incredible games ever. It literally was the start of the tournament. It was the opening game of the tournament against host Angola. And it seemed a glorious start for the host as they dominated. And Angola was up 4-0 at 74. A goal by Mali at 78 seemed a mere consolation, especially when the scoreline remained the same just 2 minutes from the end of regulation time. But Mali scored again at 88. And then again at 90+3, and then to complete an incredible comeback at 90+5.
Wow.
Yeah, what a game. The next game after that was a 1-0 loss to Algeria, but then they beat Malawi 3-0 in the final game of the group, scoring the first two goals there in the first and third minute. So overall, they finished tied on points, but with a better goal difference than Algeria. However, the head-to-head tie-breaking criteria took precedence, so they finished behind Algeria in third place. 2012 and 2013 saw them finish third twice in a row. In 2012, they beat Gabon and South Africa, both on penalties in the respective quarterfinals. And in both cases, they beat an apathetic Ghana in the third place match. They had fallen to Ivory Coast and Nigeria in the respective semifinals. 2015 was interesting. It saw them tie all three group stage games and actually end tied for second with Guinea, who had an identical record. In fact, they were tied on all criteria. So for the first time since 1998, how would they resolve it?
Is this the drawing of lots that we've seen before?
Unbelievable in 2015, but indeed it was. And Mali came out at the short end again and failed to advance from the group stage. I say again because they were a bit unlucky with Algeria there in 2013. Anyway, to summarize, the only three times they've been knocked out at the group stage, they had finished tied with the second place team for one reason or another, and they came out at the bottom end. So a bit of an odd history, I must say.
Odd, but a pretty successful history in African Cups overall, despite a bit of bad luck.
Yeah, you're right there. Let's see how it's gone from 2017.
So in qualifying, they did well to overcome Benin, who had troubled them in the last two previous World Cup qualifications, and they took first place in the qualifying group. They did tie them away, but trounced them at home in the final game to take top spot in qualifying, with Equatorial Guinea and South Sudan, the other teams who they beat in both legs. They got off to a good start in the tournament, tying Egypt, but lost to Ghana next and could only manage a draw with Uganda. So they finished third in the group stage.
Yeah, I would say that's their worst group stage ever.
In 2019, Mali once again had an easy qualifying group, but faltered only in as far as tying second place Burundi twice. They won all other games against Gabon and a weak South Sudan to finish first in the qualifying group. A good performance in the group stage of the tournament saw them tying top-seeded Tunisia and beating Mauritania, two teams they meet here again, and they also beat Angola to finish first in the group stage. They were the better team against Ivory Coast, but lost to them on a single goal in the round of 16.
Right. Okay, well, we'll take a quick look at their local cup history. So the WAFU Nations Cup is almost covered by the introductory comments that we made above. They didn't participate in the early editions, except for 2011, where they entered but then withdrew. Their first complete tournament was in 2017, where they were knocked out at the group stage. And in 2019, they reached the semi-finals where they were knocked out by eventual winners Senegal. All right, so let's summarize Mali.
Well, they are a strange team in their bipolarities, a short and unsuccessful history in the World Cup, and a long history with some impressive successes in the African Cup. They didn't often reach the African Cup before 2008, but when they did, they invariably finished in the top four. When they were knocked out at the group stage, they were almost every time tied with the second place finisher. Ultimately, though, they are on the weak side. They can be credited with consistency in their good runs, but it was always against second-class competition. When they do run into top teams, they are usually no match.
Yeah, I don't know if that was apparent in our look there, but they are a classic second-tier team. A close analysis of most of their runs shows them successful over second-tier teams, but wilting against top-tier teams, tying them at best. So it's actually continued into the present with Gabon and Burundi as the main competitors in 2019, Guinea in 2021, and Uganda in 2022 World Cup qualifying. So Guinea actually bested them in 2021, even though Mali finished first. But it comes down to Mali's consistency over those even or weaker teams. And even though they advanced over Tunisia in the group stage in 2019, they did only manage a tie with them in the head-to-head match.
Well, that's a good lead into their 2021 qualifying because it's a similar story. They were bested by Guinea, but consistency, um, you know, saw them winning out, winning all games over Namibia and Chad, who were disqualified halfway through. And that saw them finish first in their qualifying group.
Right. Sorry, I kind of scooped you in the summary there. But anyway, let us move on beyond recent friendlies because they haven't had any games beyond those World Cup qualifiers. They actually did have a friendly scheduled with Malawi on January 3rd, just a few days ago, but that game was cancelled. So we'll move to their players. And another odd thing, Connor, about Mali is that they have two players named Adama Traore, both born in 1995, and both with the similar number of caps, and it's so hard to tell them apart, and basically websites can't because they sometimes credit a goal to one player or the other player. It's just a nightmare to work it out. But they've actually now taken, one of them is called Adama Traore Malouda, and the other one is called Adama Nos Traore. I think that's how they've worked it out. And you can see both of them are on the scorers list here. But by far the biggest scorer and newcomer to the team is Ibrahima Kone with 5 goals in their 2022 World Cup qualifying campaign. Any other familiar names there for you?
There's a couple players that play in the Premier League. Musa Djenepo with Southampton and Yves Bissouma with Brighton and Hove Albion. Yves Bissouma in particular, a real midfield general. They also have Amadou Haidara, who plays with RB Leipzig in Germany. And I should mention, because you brought it up, one of the Traores, Adama Traore Malouda, he plays in Moldova with Sharif Tiraspol, who were surprise Champions League participants, and he actually scored a goal in their first group stage game, which was a win against Shakhtar Donetsk. So plays for a small club, but part of a team that even beat Real Madrid in the Champions League. So it's a good run he had with his club team.
Great. Maybe that'll help us to separate the two. Let's move on to our feature player, Ibrahim Kone. And can you tell us a bit about him, Connor?
Yeah, for sure. He's 22 years old. He's actually been with the team since 2017. He only has 6 caps for Mali, but has an incredible 8 goals, so averaging more than a goal a game, though over a small sample size. And he's played for the last several years in Norway, currently with the team Sarpsborg there.
Yeah, I think he got hat tricks in 2 games. One of them was against Kenya in qualifying here, but as you say, a very good record.
Yeah, a young player, but one to watch not just in this tournament, but perhaps for Mali going forward, especially with that crucial home and away World Cup qualifier coming up.
Yeah, I think they'll definitely be looking for him for goals for this tournament. It'll be interesting to see. Let's move on to Mauritania. And how about a nickname?
Yeah, the nickname is Morabitoons. So perhaps similar to their country name, but I'm not 100% sure what it means.
Okay. Starting with an overview of their participation and achievements. First international game was in 1961, but they didn't enter World Cup qualification until 1978. And African Cup, we'll get to that in a bit. Their second World Cup qualification was in 1998 in the World Cup. They did play in African Cups actually during that interim, though participation was quite patchy. Having entered in 1980, they missed 4 of the 8 editions to 1994 and withdrew also in 2000. So actually that spotty participation record continued to where even from 2012 to 14, they were absent from both cups. But they have been consistent from 2015 until now. Their local group is WAFU, the West African Football Union, just like Mali above, and actually like Gambia below. They only started participating in 2017, though, even though the tournament started in 2010, and they are also eligible for the Arab Cup. But after 2 entries in the 1980s, they didn't re-enter until this most recent cup in 2021. In terms of achievement, they have never come close to the World Cup. African Cup play is better with a few competitive campaigns under their belt. Nevertheless, they didn't reach the cup until 2019. The group stage of the African Cup is their furthest progress. So we'll go back to World Cup here. In the World Cup, they've been knocked out in an early playoff every time until 2010. They had little chance, in truth, paired with Burkina Faso in 1978 and in 1998. It was Tunisia in 2002 and a little easier with Zimbabwe in 2006. Among those, their first qualification in 1978 was the closest, as they tied Burkina Faso, who was actually called Upper Volta at that time. They tied them in the first leg away. But at home, they lost, and they would never come closer to passing the preliminary stage until recent times. 2010 was the only group stage they've gone through in World Cup. But they lost all games to Morocco, Rwanda, and Ethiopia. And then in 2014, they didn't enter. Let's take a look at how they've done in the 2 most recent campaigns.
So in the 2018 World Cup campaign, they were one of the 26 weakest teams in Africa required to play in round 1 of 3. They tied South Sudan in the away leg, but comfortably won the home leg to advance. In their round 2 pairing, they stood little chance against eventual World Cup qualifiers Tunisia, losing both legs, but by a respectable 2-1 scoreline in each match. Moving on to 2022, they received a bye in round 1 of 3, a preliminary round. They were perhaps misplaced as a third-place seed over Equatorial Guinea, who ended up finishing second in the group stage that followed. They tied them and top seed Tunisia at home, but Mauritania lost to Zambia to finish last in the group stage, or round 2 of 3.
Yeah, so it looks like they troubled Tunisia a little bit there, Connor.
Yeah, a team they've met quite a lot, as we saw earlier.
Yeah, we'll take a closer look in the head-to-head. But let's move on with the African Cup history. Sorry, just let me find myself here. In the early African Cup, they at least earned points if they didn't pass a preliminary round. In 1986, they did advance over Liberia, and in 1992, they advanced in the preliminary over Gambia. In those cases, they fell easily in the following round. For example, they lost all 6 games in the 1992 round 2 group stage. 1996 was a bit better, though. It started with a group stage and saw them take points off of all the teams, including Tunisia.
Yeah.
and Senegal. Tying away with Senegal, actually, and finishing in that group ahead of Togo. In 2008, they were undefeated at home, which included a tie against eventual champions Egypt. However, they lost all games on the road. After not entering in 2012 and 2013, they were knocked out by Gambia in 2015. So they're hoping to rediscover their more competitive form that they showed in 1996 and 2008 again. Now, we normally take a deep dive into African Cup finals history at this point, but since Mauritania had not reached the Cup, at least to 2017, we're going to proceed directly to their recent campaigns.
So 2017 saw a good performance, finishing second in the group stage, despite coming in as a pot 4 team. They bested both South Africa and Gambia, who they meet here, tying both on the road and winning both at home. However, they lost twice to group winner Cameroon, but second place was not enough to qualify them for the African Cup.
Right. And 2019, there?
Well, they had a tremendous qualification that saw them qualifying for the first time for the expanded African Cup while knocking out favorites Burkina Faso. They, Angola, and Burkina Faso won all home games, but greater consistency saw them and Angola beating Botswana away while Burkina Faso only tied them. They finished second in the qualifying group behind Angola due to an inferior goals record in their head-to-head meetings. At the tournament, they lost heavily to Mali in their tournament debut, but they did well to draw Angola and especially Tunisia, who eventually finished 4th. However, Mauritania once again finished tied with Angola, but behind on goal difference, so finished last in the group stage.
Right, and yes, okay, let's move on to the WAFU Nations Cup. And other interest, because Mauritania also played in the Arab Cup. In local play, they only started entering the WAFU Cup from 2017. That year, they failed to qualify for the Cup, falling to Mali in the one game of qualification. In 2019, the Cup was kind of restructured to allow those who failed to qualify to enter what was called a plate competition, as opposed to a cup competition. So in the plate competition, they lost to Burkina Faso in qualifying, though it was close. Actually, after scoring at 73, it required a late penalty by Burkina Faso to equalize, and then a penalty shootout saw Burkina Faso win. So Mauritania in 2019 dropped to the plate competition, where they disappointingly lost to Gambia, also on penalties in the quarterfinals. So a bit of recent history between those, although that game doesn't kind of count in the head-to-head. They also recently re-entered the Arab Nations Cup. In the 9 editions of the Cup from 1963 to 2012, they had entered only twice. In 1985, they were knocked out of the group stage, and in 1992, they actually withdrew after entering. So 2021 saw the Arab Cup revived and gained stature by being taken over as a FIFA competition. But they didn't pass the group stage there either, and we'll look at the results when we examine their recent games shortly. But first, let's kind of summarize Mauritania.
So in summary, they remain a very weak team in World Cup play and have made no mark there. African Cup play is better. Spikes of improved performance occurred in 1996 and 2008 and came to unexpected fruition in 2019 and again in 2021. Competitive not only in qualification, but in the Cup, even if at the game level only. Again, we saw they had 2 draws and a loss in their only other tournament appearance.
Yeah, while never showing any strength in World Cup competition, they had some success in the African Cup in the form of some competitive performances. A 4-year absence from all competitions from 2011 to 14 saw them come back a stronger team, at least in African Cup play. So that's 3 competitive campaigns in a row. Kind of takes them out of the level of feeble that they were generally at before 2017. In the ELO rankings, this shows as a rise from about 155 to around 110 currently. And yeah, let's take a look at their qualifying cup for this campaign, or their qualifying campaign for this cup.
Yeah, well, they did very well to tie group winner Morocco, both home and away. Despite being bested by Burundi, which included their only loss, besting Central African Republic was enough for second place in the qualifying group, which was an advancing position to this tournament.
Yeah, in fact, they won both over Central African Republic.
And finished with 2 wins, 3 draws, and a single loss.
Right. And we're not taking a look at recent matches for most teams, but in the case of Mauritania, we said they reached the Arab Cup. Do you want to take us through there?
Yeah, they just played 3 group stage games before going out. A heavy loss to Tunisia in their opener was followed by a loss to the United Arab Emirates. But they did well to beat actually a decent Syrian side 2-1 in their final match.
That's right. In our Asian Cup final round of qualifying, we saw that Syria is a pretty decent team, and a decent result too against UAE in a friendly just on January 4th here. They did have a friendly scheduled with Uganda, which got cancelled. But on January 4th, they earned a draw with UAE. Also a decent result there, Connor.
Yeah, not bad. Some of those Middle Eastern teams are decent and perhaps getting stronger.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll take a quick look at their players. I must confess to not being very familiar with their players. And in fact, over 5 goals in 2021 qualifying, all scored by 5 different players. And then 2 goals in 2022 qualifying scored by 2 different players. And the only one I see repeated there is Abubakar Kamara, getting 1 goal in each one. But I think Hassan Mokhtar Ali Day is a big scorer for them, although I'm not sure he's in the squad here.
No, I don't believe he is, but I will touch on Abubakar Kamara, who you mentioned. He had a decently long spell with Fulham in the English Championship and Premier League. He declared only for Mauritania recently, but he's now part of their squad, and as we've seen on the score sheet for them already. A couple other players play in France, but on lower league clubs. A handful play in the local Mauritanian league, but really no other recognizable names stand out.
Right, a good summary there. And I got to confess, I had a bit of trouble picking out a feature player. So I just went with the captain, Abdul Bah.
Sure. Well, I can speak a little bit about him. He is a central defender and captain, as you mentioned. He has 48 caps for the national team, who he's been with since 2013. He was born in 1994, so he's only 27 years old. So not the oldest player, and perhaps on the young end for captain. He currently plays in Libya, but he did have a spell with Lens in France, as well as with the second team for Auxerre. But kind of made a home playing in North Africa, playing in Morocco, and now Libya currently.
Yeah, he's an extremely tall player. He was born in Senegal, actually. And even though you said he's kind of young for being captain, he was captain in 2019 also. And he does he's basically tied with with one other player for the most caps on the team. So obviously he's been important to them despite his fairly young age. He started all three games in 2019 there. But yeah, in game 3, actually, he was fouled and he just kind of sat down on the field 15 minutes in and then was taken off on a stretcher. But obviously he overcame that, but that took him out of game 3. And do you remember how they did in game 3?
I think they did earn a draw there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, tying 0-0 with Tunisia, actually.
Yeah. Oh, okay. But it is a heavier blow when a team like Mauritania kind of loses a top player. They don't necessarily have the resources on the bench to replace them.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. Well, that's Mauritania, and now we turn our attention to the last team in the group, Gambia. Do we have a nickname for Gambia?
We do. The nickname is the Scorpions.
Oh, I did not know that. All right, well, we'll begin with an overview of their participation and achievements. Their first international game was way back in 1953, playing as British Gambia. Gambia entered the World Cup in 1982 and completed 2 qualifications. Then they didn't enter in 1990, withdrew in 1994, but then participated consistently from 1998 onwards. Their African Cup participation roughly follows that. They first entered in 1976, but didn't enter in 1978. They joined the Cup 5 times in a row in the 1980s, but it was very patchy from 1990, where they withdrew onwards. They did participate in 1992, but either didn't enter, withdrew, or were disqualified from the following 4 Cups. They returned in 2002 and participated consistently since then, except for 2015, when they were disqualified for a second time. We'll talk about those shortly. In terms of success, they've never reached the World Cup. Their best campaign was a surprisingly competitive round 1 of 2 stage in 2010, but otherwise they haven't come close. And they had not qualified for an African Cup final either. There too, despite several more competitive campaigns, they never really came close until actually reaching it in 2021. So we'll take a quick look at the World Cup history. In World Cup play, they were knocked out in a preliminary in both campaigns in the 1980s by Libya and Ivory Coast. Although they took home points in both. That continued when they returned in 2000, falling to Liberia twice in 2 separate World Cup campaigns, despite winning the first leg at home in both cases, and by Morocco in between where they lost both legs. Can you take over, Connor?
Yes, sorry. So 2010 was their best performance by far, losing only one of their 6 games and finishing with only 1 point separating themselves, Algeria, and Senegal in round 1 of 2. However, 2014 returned to weakness. It was also a group stage. They started with a home draw against Morocco, but lost the next 4 games before beating Tanzania, who they finished last behind at home in their last game.
Right. Well, let's see if they returned to feeble form since, or whether they were again able to raise their game as they did in 2010.
Well, they were one of the 26 weakest teams in Africa required to play in round 1 of 3 in 2018 World Cup qualifying. After tying the home leg against Namibia, they lost the away leg and so were quickly out of the cup. So
Ouch.
feeble to answer your question.
Yeah, how about 2022?
They were again among the bottom half of African teams required to play in round 1 of 3, which is effectively a preliminary knockout round. Their FIFA ranking was 161, and they met Angola ranked 122nd. They kept the game close, losing by a 1-goal margin in each leg, but were eliminated at the preliminary round.
Well, not exactly feeble, but feeble. Do you agree?
I have to agree. Yeah, going out in the preliminary round does kind of group you in with the weakest tier of African teams.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll do an overview of their African Cup history. They've never qualified for an African Cup, and here too they look weak in qualification throughout most of their long history, again, usually going out in a preliminary. 1996 was shaping up to be the first exception to that, but after earning 2 rare away draws in Congo and Niger, they withdrew. Shortly after returning from their period of absence in the 90s, they had a respectable qualification in 2004 and then a downright competitive campaign in 2008. That featured 2 away draws with Guinea and Cape Verde, and home wins over Cape Verde and, believe it or not, Algeria. It only earned them 3rd place, though. They were tied with Algeria for 2nd and 3 points behind 1st place Guinea, but it did foreshadow their competitive 2010 World Cup campaign and also made it their strongest period. 2012, like 2004, saw them undefeated at home but losing all away games. But any momentum was halted by 2 defeats in a knockout round with Algeria in 2013 and then disqualification in 2015. That disqualification was for knowingly fielding overaged players in youth competitions, and it was their 2nd disqualification, together with 1998, where they were barred because of withdrawing from the 1996 qualification, which is a bit of a counterintuitive punishment, Connor, that they don't use anymore.
Yeah, for good reason.
Yeah. Anyway, returning to the Cup in 2017. Wait, maybe I got to skip this part because that's your territory.
Yeah, well, in 2017 qualification for the African Cup, they started well with a draw in South Africa, but pot 3 Gambia managed only a single draw after that, which was at home to pot 4 Mauritania, who they meet here. They finished a distant last in the qualifying group, so again, showing fairly feeble in 2017.
Yeah.
In 2019, they troubled group winners Algeria by tying them home and away, but were bested by last place Togo. Their only win was at home to Benin, but that was also their only loss on the road. So it proved enough for 2nd in the qualifying group. It didn't quite. They finished 3rd in the qualifying group, so didn't advance to the expanded tournament.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I was a little confused there. And I was also a bit confused because we normally do a deep dive into African Cup finals, but of course, Gambia has never qualified for one. So, yeah, so that wasn't a feeble performance in 2019. And obviously, they're here in 2021, so perhaps they're getting a little better. And sometimes with these weaker teams, the local tournaments actually sheds a little light. So Gambia is a member of WAFU, the West African Football Union. It's actually such a large group that the 16 members are divided into 2 zones. Interestingly named the Niger Zone and the Volta Niger Zone. They're part of the larger group, which is 9 members. But the region as a whole has the WAFU Nations Cup, which has been played since 2010. There were a few versions of tournaments in the separate zones before that. Most notably the Amilcar Cabral Cup, which had 19 editions between 1979 and 2007, and where Gambia finished in second place thrice. In 1980, 1985, they hosted both of those, and also in 2001. So, yeah, a bit competitive within that region. Recently, they only entered the Cup in 2017 and 2019, and they were knocked out in the single game of qualifying by Ghana in 2017. And that only on the only goal of the game, which was a penalty at 90+9.
Wow.
And it was Ghana, yeah. And 2017, as we saw with Mauritania, the losing team just disappears. But in 2019, they proceed to a plate competition. So it was Ghana again knocking them out in qualifying on a single goal. But here they proceeded to the plate tournament where they beat Mauritania on penalties. And then they proceeded to the semi-final where they lost to Cape Verde. I've been calling them Cape Verde, but I listened to a pronunciation on the internet today, and it's apparently Cape Verde.
All right.
So, do you want to take us to a summary?
Yeah. So Gambia have been a feeble team for most of their history, although like many African teams, they're not easily beaten at home. They had a surprisingly competitive period from 2008 to 10, but it went as quickly as it came, perhaps leaving them a bit more competitive afterwards. Their qualification for the 2021 African Cup, though, their first qualification came as a surprise, much as their strong period had previously.
Yeah, and maybe that's not so true because they did have more competitive campaigns in 2017 and in 2019. So maybe in retrospect, that foreshadowed their successful cup qualification here. But I gotta say, it took me completely by surprise. How about you, Connor?
Well, the preliminary round exits in the 2018 and 2022 World Cups did make those a kind of competitive qualification campaigns seem a bit of a fleeting success and kind of brought back down to earth in World Cup play.
Yeah, but the very fact that they're here shows that their third competitive African Cup qualification was successful. So let's take a look at it more closely.
Well, perhaps just to show what an achievement it is or from how far they've come, they were one of the 8 weakest teams in the region who had to undergo a preliminary round.
Wow.
And they just squeezed past Djibouti on a penalty shootout, drawing both of their games home and away. So this illustrates again what a shock it was when coming in as a 4th seed, they came first. They came first in the qualifying group. They were bested by top-seeded Congo DR, who finished 3rd, and they lost away to second place Gabon, finishing above them only by dint of the 7th criterion of more goals in the campaign. But they twice beat bottom finishers Angola. So they had a record of 3 wins, 1 draw, and 2 losses, and finished tied for first place, but through on the criteria of goals scored.
That is something. I mean, you got to put that down as much to Congo DR's inconsistency too.
Yeah, for sure. The top team really should have won that group, but
Absolutely, yeah.
finished third. But it opened up a door, and Gambia strode through it.
Yeah, well, good for them. So actually, they, unlike most African teams, didn't play World Cup qualifiers in September to November. But surprisingly, they didn't play any friendlies either. They did schedule a couple of friendlies in early January here with Algeria on January 1st and Syria on January 4th, but both of those games got cancelled. So they, as far as I know, haven't played a game since June 2021.
Yeah, that could potentially hamper them in their preparation.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's take a look at their players here. In 2021, Athan Cisse is kind of the outstanding scorer with 3 of their goals. He also got their only goal in 2022 World Cup qualification. And Moussa Barrow, I believe he's a familiar name to you, Connor.
Yeah, Moussa Barrow plays with Bologna in Italy, but even more familiar is a different Barrow, Modu Barrow. He currently plays in South Korea, but he had a spell with Swansea City and also Reading, playing in the Premier League, but also in the Championship. So probably one of the more illustrious players in their history.
Right. Yeah, they have a few good teams like Omar Colley plays for Sampdoria. That's pretty good. Some of them play. Oh no, just the one player plays in South Africa. But we're going to spotlight a player who plays in Zurich.
Yeah, plays with Zurich in Switzerland, and that's Hassan Cisse, their leading goal scorer in qualification, as you mentioned. He has 11 goals across 23 caps, so a pretty good record. 27 years old. And yeah, he's played in Switzerland since 2016, but with Zurich since 2018.
Yeah. So yeah, that's for a weaker team like Gambia, 11 goals in 23 games is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
So obviously they'll be looking toward him to get them on the score sheet. All right. Well, that completes part 2 of the podcast, the team by team look, and now we'll move on to part 3. Where we look at the prospects of each team, starting with the rankings of each team.
Yeah, so we'll begin with the Pot 1 team, Tunisia. They're ranked 30th according to FIFA, but way down in 53rd according to ELO. So quite a discrepancy there.
Yeah.
They're 4th overall in FIFA rankings, but 4th overall among African countries in FIFA rankings, but 7th in ELO. Mali, as a Pot 2 team, they're ranked 53rd in FIFA and 58th in ELO. So that's 9th or 8th in Africa, according to the two systems. So interestingly, Tunisia, 23 points or places above Mali in FIFA, but only 5 above them in ELO, which we tend to find a bit more reliable, but we'll discuss them more in their prospects.
Yeah, just right next to each other in ELO rankings in Africa there.
Yeah. And then we drop down a little bit. Mauritania are 103rd in FIFA and 116th in ELO, which is either 23rd or 28th in Africa. And then Gambia are 150th in FIFA, but 115th in ELO. So interestingly, they're 47 places behind Mauritania in FIFA rankings, but a place ahead of them in ELO, which is 46th or 27th in Africa overall.
Well, it pains me to say it, but I think I agree with FIFA more on that one.
Yikes.
How about you?
I probably don't see them as far apart from each other as the FIFA ranking suggests. I don't see Mauritania being, potentially 47 spots higher than Gambia.
Oh, I don't mean that. I just mean ELO has, yeah, you're right. ELO has Gambia ahead of Mauritania. That's more what I was reacting to.
Gotcha.
Okay, well, we'll get into opinion shortly. Let's take a look at the odds that they're given.
So Tunisia ranks 8th amongst all teams in the African Cup. Interesting, given they were one of the top 6 teams seeded for this tournament.
Yeah.
Mali ranks 10th overall. Gambia ranks 15th, so ahead of Mauritania, despite being the pot 4 team. And Mauritania is 19th out of 24 countries deemed most likely to win the tournament.
Once again, I beg to differ.
All right, we'll get to that right away. But first, you can take us through head-to-head.
Okay, Tunisia and Mauritania. We've seen actually in the podcast that Mauritania does trouble Tunisia. I suppose not as much as it seemed, because Tunisia has a record of 6 wins, 3 draws, and 0 losses. But we did see that Mauritania managed to tie in the 2019 African Cup group stage, and also in 2022 World Cup qualifying. So making it a bit spicier in this group, I suppose. Tunisia have never played Gambia in official. Well, I basically use cups and qualifications for this record. So in terms of that, Mali and Tunisia have just a record of. Mali has 1 win, 1 draw, and 0 losses. And let me see what happened there. Yeah, we saw in 2019 that they tied in the group stage, but Mali dominated the group and passed in first there. Mali and Mauritania, it's 2 wins for Mali, 0 draws, and 1 loss. That was way back in 1982 when they lost. So Mali with the superior record there. Mali and Gambia have an even record, but we won't talk about it. It's 1-0 and 1. They exchanged home wins way back in 1984. So in effect, haven't really met in recent times. And Mauritania and Gambia. Mauritania has the better record with 2 wins, 1 draw, and 1 loss. They last met in 2017 qualifying, and Mauritania bested Gambia, but no surprise that Gambia earned a draw at home. And that's it.
All right, well, let's get into a discussion of the prospects. Do you want to start, or do you want me to start?
You go ahead.
Well, Tunisia, they're the seeded team. They've kind of been building in strength over the last few campaigns. But typically, they are a team that passes the group stage of African Cups, and they're very regular participants here in recent times. Mali, I do see as we kind of describe them as a second-tier team, capable of beating teams below them, but not really challenging teams above them, above their level. And I do see Tunisia being above their level here. Though a good World Cup qualifying campaign for 2022 does perhaps show that they're in good form coming in. And then Mauritania and Gambia, I do see as really 2 of the weaker teams in the tournament. This is Gambia's first ever appearance. Mauritania have only appeared once before, so they have just 3 African Cup games between them and no wins. So, they're a bit of an unknown entity at this level, but I think the fact that they rarely reach it is kind of evidence that they may not be particularly competitive.
Yeah. I'm afraid I got to disagree with you in the first part. I'll first of all just say, and I'm sure you'll agree, that I don't see any challenge from the 2 teams from the 2 lower teams to the 2 upper teams. I see a bit of a gulf between them. Do you?
I do agree. I really would be surprised to see either Mauritania or Gambia finish in second place, or even to get a win against Tunisia or Mali.
Yeah. On the other hand, though, Connor, I feel it's pretty close between Tunisia and Mali. I'm not sure Tunisia really is a pot 1 team. because they really don't make it past the quarterfinals that much. Mali have a bit of an odd history, but one that does take them to the top four from time to time, you know. But we saw in the rankings that they're very close to each other, and in the odds makers too. I think in Tunisia's favour, I think they have grown in strength a little bit in the past few campaigns, but I don't think that's anything that Mali couldn't overcome with a reasonably good performance. So I see that as very tight at the top.
I think it could be, though. I do see Tunisia as a better team. They probably don't get a lot of attention, but they kind of fly under the radar. I mean, making it to the 2018 was quite impressive, as was the last four of the last African Cup. So they may not get kind of as much attention as, and perhaps because of a lack of a star player, which many of the other African teams have. But I think they're a strong team. In general, they tend to be a consistent performer. So I do agree with you that they're probably not a pot one team, especially when you look at some of the teams like Ivory Coast, that was a pot two team for this tournament. I don't really see them being better than that level. But I do see them stronger than Mali overall. I mean, Mali finished ahead of them in the group stage last time they met. So it's possible they could do so again, but I would favor Tunisia to come out ahead.
I think maybe one thing you're discounting is Mali's luck. I agree with you that when they run into, or we saw when they run into top level teams, that they usually no contest, but they're once again lucky in meeting Tunisia, which I think we agree is at best at the kind of the bottom of the pot one, or even at the top of pot two teams. And they did tie them in 2019 and win the group over them. So I'm not completely joking about that. I think Mali have been pretty lucky in the past, and I think they're kind of lucky with Tunisia as the top team here.
Yeah, overall, one of the probably weaker groups in the cup. But would you consider, kind of on that point, Tunisia a top level African team?
In what sense?
Would you consider them kind of a first tier team, or do you kind
No,
of think on the
I agreed with you about Ivory Coast. I don't put them up there with say Nigeria or a top tier team because they don't pass the quarterfinals generally.
Yeah, we should mention that Egypt and Ghana were pot two teams as well, so perhaps a surprise that Tunisia was pot one. But like I said, I'll disagree with you a little bit in that I think they're a little bit underrated and kind of fly under the radar.
Yeah, I don't mean any disrespect to Tunisia, because we've seen for a smaller, they're one of the smaller countries as far as top tier teams go, and they've accounted for themselves well. But let's leave that discussion. I have another point to make. I absolutely can't believe that anyone is putting Gambia ahead of Mauritania here. I'm gobsmacked by that. I think Gambia is probably the weakest team in the tournament.
Yeah, that's it's interesting because the odds makers kind of perhaps surprisingly don't see them as the weakest team in the tournament.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not sure. I mean,
I think we saw those three good qualification runs from 2017 to 2021. Mauritania had at least two good qualification runs because they've qualified for the last two. But we saw Gambia's feeble in the World Cup. I think it's still a question whether this was a kind of a flash of luck or a flash of good form. But I would say Mauritania can argue to be a stronger team on the basis that they've made it twice now.
Well, and perhaps that experience will come into play, that they've been in this tournament and they know a little bit more about what it's about. Mauritania, of course, have only qualified since there's been 24 teams. Would you consider this a team that you would expect to qualify in a 2014 tournament going
Oh,
forward?
no, I agree with what you said. I think they are among the two weakest teams. I think they've done very well to qualify, and I wouldn't expect them to be regular qualifiers. But I don't think they're shock qualifiers like Gambia is.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean they in their campaign, I guess, to qualify for this tournament, I mean, tying Morocco twice is no small achievement. But on the other hand, their only two wins came against Central African Republic, who are a very weak team. So I'm not sure we really have a great sense of them coming into this tournament. And you could again look at their 2022 World Cup qualification, where they were not competitive and didn't win any of their 6 games. So, yeah, like we said, two of the weakest teams. I don't see them being a clearly better team than Gambia. I think it could be close, but perhaps we'll give it the edge to them based on their experience of being here last time.
Okay. Well, having said that, I'll start with them as far as beyond the group stage. I don't see either of these teams going beyond the group stage. I think they kind of have to take points off the top two to finish high enough as a third place team, and I don't think they will be able to.
Yeah, and actually a draw against each other would kind of end any hopes you would think of advancing. So the game against each other would be the crucial game, I think, as far as they're concerned.
Yeah, what do you see as the long-term prospects for Tunisia?
I think they did well to get to the top 4 last time. I think they're a good, consistent, and perhaps slightly underrated team. But we've kind of questioned their place in pot 1, which has them amongst the top 6 teams in the tournament. I would be surprised if they made it, among the last 4 again. If they win the group, they have a chance of getting a favorable round of 16 draw and advancing there. But I think quarterfinals is as far as I see them going.
I kind of think so too, but I mean, you have to give credit to the second place finish in the Arab Cup, which I believe maybe not a stiff competition as the best teams in Africa, but a lot of the good teams are there. Ghana and Qatar is on fire in basically in the Asian division too. So yeah, I wouldn't say that makes me believe that they're going to finish in the top 4. I think they'll be in the quarterfinals again, but it wouldn't. If this kind of uprise in their strength is for real, then I think the top 4 is not out of the question.
Yeah, I think the Arab Cup is another good example of perhaps flying under the radar a little bit, and that's their most recent game. So, perhaps a second place finish there, could be more representative of their form at this current time.
Yeah.
As for Mali, I probably see the round of 16 as their limit. If they do win the group, which is not beyond them, they could get a favorable draw and then end up in the quarterfinals. But I think realistically, second place is more likely and perhaps out then at the round of 16.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. We've noted in their description that they basically don't do well against top level teams. So I think as soon as they meet one, that'll be the end for them. And as you say, if they manage to, say, win the group and get past the top 16 without meeting a top level team, that would be good. But I think they'll be pretty sure to meet one by the quarterfinals, which would make it their limit.
Right.
Okay, but I'm really wary of you dancing around the question. I want you to give it to me straight. How is this group going to turn out?
I'm going to say Tunisia win the group. I do see them as the best team here. I see Mali coming second. And I'm actually going to say Mauritania and Gambia draw with each other, lose their other games, and finish tied for third and fourth at the bottom.
All right. Well, we are at odds here. If I was forced to choose, I would say Tunisia in first and Mali in second. But I actually think that they're quite even. So if you're going to say a tie at the bottom, then I'm going to say a tie at the top with both of those teams advancing. And definitely, I think Mauritania is going to finish ahead of Zambia. So there we have it.
All right, not in agreement. We'll see how this group turns out.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Connor, and maybe you can take us with an outro there by reviewing the podcast information.
Right. So you can find this podcast and all the others, that's group A to E, up on our website at soccerfiles.captivate.fm. You can also find us by Googling Soccer Files Canada, and you'll find us there. And if you have any questions, comments, or feedback, we'd love to hear what you think about our preview. You can email us at soccerfiles, that's SOCCERPHILES @gmail.com. And also keep your eye out for some player-specific podcasts for the teams in the African Cup, which will be posted shortly.
Yeah, that's right. We haven't decided exactly the schedule, but Connor and I will be doing at least some of the top teams that are expected to kind of go far in the tournament. And we're even going to put out a couple for some of the smaller teams. So keep your eye out for that. And thanks so much, Connor. This is the last of our series. I guess we won't do another one until World Cup.
Yeah, it's been great. The African Cup is always interesting. Despite our predictions, we know there will be upsets. So can't wait to watch the tournament.
Gambia wins it all.
We shall see.
Bye.
Bye.